What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook Monday afternoon. It's a national holiday. It's MLK Day. I hope you're enjoying a day off if you got one. If you don't, hope you're enjoying this broadcast from work and stealing a little time away from the company while you talk some Packers with me. Not a whole lot of news breaking on this Monday afternoon, but did want to jump on, as I usually do, and see what's on your minds, take some questions, talk some Packers with you. Kyle, hello. Nelson, Michael, thanks for joining us. Monica's very kind of you. Good afternoon, James. So, lots of people jumping on. Obviously, everyone's always ready to talk some Packers, even in the absence of any true hard breaking news. The one thing we did uncover today from my colleague Michael Cohn, Demarius Randall is here in New York City, had surgery earlier today on his hand. Apparently, he had an issue with a bone in his hand that was bothering him all year. He played through it and now has had that taken care of. So make sure you check PackersNews.com for the details on that. Steve, thanks so much. Very nice of you to say. David, the defense is ready to return to the top 10. I think they got the coach. I think Mike Pettin is a great hire. Now it's all about the personnel. Jeff, it's your birthday. I will say your name, Jeff, but I'll have you know that in the pantheon, the power rankings of birthdays on January 15th, I got to put you number 2 at the highest because it is also my wife's birthday today. I am actually ducking out of her celebration as we speak. So this will be a short video because I've got a room full of people, room full of kids. Everyone's going nuts, and I'm here talking to you fine folks. Thoughts on the Packers going for one of the Vikings quarterbacks for a backup? It's a possibility, Jeremy. We'll see who actually hits the market. I do think they will look at free agency as a way to kind of bolster competition at the quarterback spot. I don't think there's any way they can just go into next year with Brett Hundley as their primary backup without at least bringing in some competition, either through the draft or through a free agency. But the Vikings backups, it's a possibility. It all depends on who hits free agency. Who is responsible for not discovering Taysom Hill's ability on special teams? Well, it's an indictment on the entire coaching staff, I guess, if you have to lay blame. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with Ted Thompson, since he's the one who cut him. They need to be aggressive this offseason. Sean, I agree somewhat. I think they need to explore all avenues, but they don't need to sign people just to sign them. That's a recipe for disaster. I think much more than anything, they need to hit on their draft picks, and they need to get a good return off their last 2 drafts. I thought Tom Silverstein wrote it really well. If you didn't see his column this morning at PackersNews.com, make sure you check that out. But, you know, they can augment what they have as far as, especially on the defensive side of the ball, obviously, via free agency. But that doesn't mean that they need to go crazy. What they do need to have happen is have a lot of the guys who were injured this year, their rookie years, whether it's Kevin King, although he did play, you know, obviously quite a bit, showed promise. But guys like Montravius Adams and Vince Beagle, who basically redshirted their entire freshman year of the NFL, they need to step up their second season in the NFL and make a big jump from what can only be considered, you know, incomplete rookie campaigns. If no one told you today that they hate the Vikings, I just did. Well, I'm sure that sentiment is shared by a lot of Packers fans. I got to admit, I thought last night's finish was amazing. That's why you watch the game. That's why I love the game of football. And it's also a great example of why I always say a lot of ball game left. If there's time on the clock and you're still a score away, there's always a chance that something can break your way. The game is never over until you reach 0. And I thought last night was a perfect encapsulation of that. Is it okay to root for the Vikings on Sunday because Trey Waynes plays for them? You can root for whoever you want to. I mean, I am not here to be the arbiter of fandom. You guys, you do you. Whatever fits your boat. Need a fast receiver. Don, I tend to agree. Somebody asked me on Twitter what my top 3 priorities would be for the Packers this offseason. And I believe my answer was in some way, I can't remember the exact order, but I think it was in the following way. Speed on offense, a difference maker on defense, and find out who's going to be your starting right tackle, at least for the first half of the season, because you got to think Brian Bulaga will not be ready to start the year. So I definitely agree. Speed on offense / at wide receiver is something they need to look at. And I know a lot of people will yell the names Trevor Davis and Jeff Janis, but we've seen what those guys are, and they are not bona fide NFL wide receivers. They need a legit frontline speedster to complement what they already have. And of course, I say that, and that is my belief. But if Brian Gutekunst is anywhere near what, in the realm of the Ron Wolf / Ted Thompson mold, he probably will stick with what they have and see what they have with D'Angelo Yancey going from year 1 to year 2, a bigger, stronger receiver, but not a speedster. Because that has been the way since Ron Wolf took over in the early 90s. They have always looked for big guys, those traditional West Coast guys who can work the middle of the field and can muscle through their opponents, especially when the weather turns, you're playing November and December football. You want those big, strong guys trying to kind of work the middle of the field and be able to kind of survive those rugged winters, so to speak. But I'm of the opinion, and that's why I would say the biggest need is probably speed on offense in general, not just at wide receiver. It could be a tight end, it could be a running back. It doesn't really matter. They need a game-changing type player, somebody who can, break a big play anytime he touches the ball wherever he's at. And right now, I think they have some potential. I think Aaron Jones obviously has the potential to be a game breaker. I do think you've got really good run after the catch ability with Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb, but as far as a guy who can touch the ball and is electric and just makes guys even with good angles look bad, they don't have that. They haven't had that for a long time. Is it wrong to be happy and cheer for the NFC North? No, not at all. Do what you do. If the shoe's on the other foot, would Gutekunst get offers from the Raiders and Browns like Elliott did? I think so. I know he's highly regarded, not only from guys who worked with him in Green Bay, but around the NFL. Remember, he was going to be interviewing for that Texans job. He was a front runner in San Francisco. Obviously had interest from other places. With a couple years ago, the Packers blocked the moves, the interview process. So I tend to think that would be a good bet. Excuse me. Move Josh Jones to middle linebacker. He has burst and coverage skills. I don't think it's a crazy idea. We'll see how Mike Pettin decides to use him. I do think he is much better the closer he gets to the line of scrimmage, the better off he is, because he looked absolutely lost in space for a good part of last year, especially down the stretch. Do you see King being a game changer on defense in the future? I don't see him as somebody who is going to tilt the field, so to speak. I do think he has the potential to be a very good player. But I don't see him as somebody, at least not yet, and I don't project him to be the kind of guy that opposing offensive coordinators, spend extra time on and have to worry about and game plan around. Now, it's very early in his career. That could absolutely become the case, but I don't see that at the moment. Why does everybody want to move to wide receiver with all the injuries at running back? It's a good question. I don't understand the need to label him at all. He's going to be an asset on the offensive side of the ball, regardless of what they call him. It doesn't really matter if you call him a wide receiver or if you call him a running back. You can call him broccoli. It doesn't matter. You put the ball in his hands, good things are going to happen. Did Murphy change structure to keep Ball happy? Bob, that's an interesting question. If anything, if you read Pete Doherty's column this morning at PackersNews.com, I'd say it was much more about keeping Mike McCarthy happy. Pete has two sources indicating that the rumors about McCarthy being unhappy with the prospect of Ball being GM were very well-founded. So if anybody got what they wanted and got one out in this power structure change, it was Mike McCarthy. Sheldon Richardson is a free agent pickup? I guess it's a possibility. I don't know if he even hits free agency. And if he does, I would imagine he's going to be in high demand and create demand high dollar. I don't know about Gutekunst and his way of working going forward. Obviously, that's something we need to find out. But I would feel that'd be a little rich for his blood, but you never know. Why is McCarthy not running more crossing routes? It's a good question. What's funny is he used to run them quite a bit the later stages of Favre's career. James Jones used to make a living on them, those shallow crosses, which would be delayed over the middle. He's gotten away from that. Now, to be fair, some of that is his quarterback. McCarthy does call them. I can bring up a whole bunch of tape for you where there are low crosses, there are shallow crossers, there are crossing routes called, and Rodgers just doesn't throw it. There's been a bevy of those over the last 3 or 4 years where, especially third down calls, where there'll be a guy crossing. There's one in particular against the Chiefs a couple years ago where Randall Cobb is screaming wide open over the middle. Rodgers either doesn't see him or doesn't want to throw it, and he throws it to Devontae Adams instead, and Adams ends up getting hurt and missing a high throw. So, I understand that it's kind of the old complaint we get on Twitter during the games all the time too, where people say, why doesn't he call slants more after a slant works? They call it a lot. Slant flat is one of their bread and butter concepts, but just because Rodgers isn't pulling the trigger doesn't mean those plays aren't being called. Will Green Bay make a go for Case Keenum? Right, I can't imagine the Vikings letting him get away. I would be absolutely shocked if they let him go. Do you think Ted Thompson rated Brian Gutekunst over Elliot Wolf? It's very possible. He was part of the interview process. He did. Mark Murphy did say that he would lean on Thompson and talk to Thompson about internal candidates. I can't say, I don't think he had a say in who got hired, but I would, if his word held weight and Murphy went that way, I guess that's definitely a possibility. Obviously, we'll never know, but I do think Ted obviously feels strongly and holds Elliot Wolf in high regard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have blocked him from several interview attempts by other teams, and he wouldn't have promoted him throughout the years. But I do think Gutekunst has a good many-year advantage and has background in both pro personnel and in college scouting. Elliot very much coming up on the pro personnel side, had made inroads on the college side the last few years, but now they obviously went with a more experienced guy. Do you see anyone from the practice squad stepping up next year? I'm interested to see what Emmanuel Byrd has, the guy that they called up late in the year at tight end. See if they bring him back. I really liked him in camp once he got his feet under him. And I think D'Angelo Yancey has a chance. He did a lot of promising things down towards the end of camp and then the end of preseason. I think he just got caught in a numbers game, but I think he's an intriguing guy, and he's definitely someone to watch next year. Is Mark Lovat still strength and conditioning coach? Tim, as of right now, yes, he is. Oh, you look like a head cold. Yeah, I got a head cold, no doubt. What effect do you see Joe Philbin having on the run game? Great question, Josh. What's funny is I thought Bennett, Campen, everyone on the offensive side of the ball did a great job this year as far as adapting to the personnel they had up front and making the run game work in ways that they hadn't tried in the last few years. So I'm interested to see how that continues under Philbin. Obviously, he comes up. He was an offensive line coach back in the day. The Packers were very, very productive when he was offensive coordinator last time he was in town. Clearly, that's why he got the job down in Miami. As far as what effect he'll have on the run game, I have to wait and see, especially see how the line shakes out on the right side, both right tackle and right guard. But I do think it's a good bet McCray as your starting right guard. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that solidifies. And does that mean a return to some more zone concepts, or will they continue down the path of a lot more angle blocking than we saw this year? Stay tuned. What say does the general manager have on contracts now? That's a really good question. I tend to think, the way I've kind of read it, is that Gutekunst will pick the 53. But if he wants to sign someone and or extend someone, obviously he has to work in concert with Russ Ball, and he basically has to ask, can we make this work? And Russ Ball will have to find a way to make it work, which isn't unlike probably the way it was working with Ted Thompson. But it's definitely not, Ted Thompson under the old power structure had the power. Now, I don't think he ever did this, but he absolutely would have been within his rights in the organization to say, we're signing this guy, make it work. Now it's very much set up where Gutekunst has to say, I want to sign this guy, can we make it work? That's the biggest difference. Was Randall's hand surgery successful today? It sure seems like it. Haven't got confirmation, obviously. I think we would have heard something. Make sure you're checking back at PackersNews.com. Michael Cohen have all the latest for you. Janice is a beast. Oh, Paul. Yes, at catching one type of route. He absolutely is. What do you think having coordinators that are former head coaches says about McCarthy? That's a good question. Well, obviously he's got a long history with Philbin, so I think that hire is much more about their past relationship, and clearly Philbin got that job because of the success he had in Green Bay with McCarthy. As far as Mike Pettin goes, I think Pettin did the best he could in that situation in Cleveland. And I think McCarthy most likely respected that and obviously thought the defensive philosophy was a good fit. As far as, I think I know where that question is headed. The idea that because McCarthy's on only a 2-year contract and they could easily fire him at the end of the year with only 1 year remaining on his deal, would there be a head coach in waiting, so to speak, ready to step in? Well, they had that in Dom Capers, and he was a guy who was a head coach, twice, and that was never an issue. That was never even a discussion, as far as I know, in the building. So, I think it says that McCarthy's attracted some top talent more than about his job security. Raji is a free agent tight end. Who knows, Carl? Do you think we should go get Jimmy Graham? Abel, I get asked that question a lot. 1, let's see if Seattle lets him go. 2, I got to admit, I am not, anybody who's followed me on Twitter for any number of years knows, I'm not the world's biggest Jimmy Graham fan. I think he's an athletic guy. He can get down the seam for you. He can probably do what Jared Cook did for the offense, but man, he's one of the softest players in the NFL. He's a terrible blocker. He's a front runner who shrinks when things go against him and when his team falls behind, and he just disappears for long stretches. And man, that's not my type of player. Just never has been. But I get that he is a talent. There's no doubt about it, and he would probably be an asset to the offense. So obviously, I would understand it if they signed him. It's just not the kind of guy I'd want to lay out big money for. Allison Montgomery should replace Jordy and Cobb. That's interesting. My only question there is, both Nelson and Cobb excel in the slot. Now, Montgomery could probably do that, but I don't see Allison as a slot guy, although he has worked there a little bit the last year. I don't think there's any need to replace any of them. I understand that people looking at the contracts and saying, quote unquote, he's not worth it. First of all, I disagree entirely on the Cobb scenario, but as far as Nelson, I think, yeah, he could probably stand to take a pay cut or a restructure, which he has said he's amiable to doing. But yeah, I don't like the idea of cutting talent just because of the price structure, your salary cap structure, when there's really no need. They can hit it. They can take that hit on their cap. It's a 1-year spike in spending at the wide receiver spot. It's not going to kill them. It's not going to stop them from signing anybody. It's not going to preclude them from signing Aaron Rodgers to a contract extension, which is their number one priority. So why are you doing it just to do it? That doesn't make any sense. All right, everybody. I'm going to have to get back and celebrate my wife's birthday, but I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back throughout the week to talk some more Packers with you. Maybe if there's more news, I'll jump on immediately, but if not, it'll probably be later in the day like it is today. In the meantime, make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.